I'm Michael Sillerman. I'm a land use lawyer, and I ask you rhetorically why you didn't think of having someone from the Department of City Planning on this panel, because listening to this, I think there's a kind of Maginot Line, fighting the last war depiction of public space and the approach to it in New York City. The 61 Plaza stuff may have been flawed, but it was innovative, and the standards have gotten much better, much rigorous. Many of those plazas have been upgraded, and you should be talking about the public attention to creating the High Line, to creating, as David mentioned, the Hudson Park and Boulevard, the Culture Shed. In the outer boroughs, all of the waterfront access regulations require a dedication of a healthy percentage of your land, 10, 15, 20% to public realm things. So I think it's a much more nuanced and less simplistic story about how we're dealing with public space than you've presented here.
Actually, interesting that you mention the waterfront, because another controversial place that we can talk about in terms of who pays for it would be Brooklyn Bridge Park. Brooklyn Bridge Park is a tremendous amenity, but somewhat controversially, it's expensive to maintain, and the money to maintain it is being obtained by allowing developers to build on what is public land, build for profit. So there's another public-private partnership, and maybe that's the way we have to go.
I mean, I would be very unhappy if anybody in this audience took away what, Michael, you're taking away from this, and I would feel bad if that's the way you've read this panel. I don't think anybody is saying anything about, whether there aren't wonderful public spaces and whether Amanda Burden's administration didn't ratchet up the requirements for modifications or new plazas. They did. It's absolutely terrific. And that's all great. And certainly, as I've said, go to apops.mas.org and look at the nuances that are involved in trying to not monitor and enforce and hector owners about keeping the space open, but to actually upgrade what's there when there are some bad spaces that were really dominating the first 15 years of the program until 1975, when Holly White's recommendations first got introduced, and then 1977, and then onward to 82, onward up through Amanda and the administration. So I think I'm glad you said what you said, just in case there were any misunderstanding. I think what we're all saying, if I can characterize for us, and my colleagues can add to it or disagree, is that when one relies on this public-private partnership model, there are certain potentially extra challenges that need to be taken into account. That's all. And it's a great thing to get the private money in there to do things that are otherwise not done. But it also means being clever on both sides to guarantee that the public interest is vindicated as well. And there are examples where the public interest is greatly vindicated. I happen to think Brooklyn Bridge Park is terrific. I actually worked on that with Michael Van Valkenburg in a small way on some of the financing elements early on. As you know, there are some people who are horrified about how it's financed and think it's privatized and think it's really a private park. I disagree. People can talk about this High Line, the same thing, a lot of these spaces. I personally think these are great additions. This is where we are, but let's do it in a clever way on both public and private sides, but especially on the public side.